8:15 a.m., August 6, 1945. In an instant, Hiroshima vanished. A single bomb erased 70,000 lives within seconds. By the end of the year, that number had doubled. The world had finally seen what ultimate destruction looked like, and it changed humanity forever. But here we are again. Nuclear weapons are back in the news. In 2024, reports surfaced of renewed discussions about returning to nuclear testing.
Breaking tonight, President Trump has ordered the Pentagon to immediately resume nuclear weapons testing.
President Trump ordered the Pentagon to immediately resume testing nuclear weapons.
The Pentagon says it is quickly moving on President Trump's order to restart nuclear weapons testing.
Russia went on military alert, and once again, the same Cold War fear began creeping back into global consciousness. We said we'd learned from the past. We said never again. Yet somehow, we find ourselves circling the same nightmare, forgetting that these weren't just political weapons, they were human tragedies. Hiroshima woke up to clear skies on August 6, 1945. The city had a population of approximately 350,000 people. It was Japan's seventh largest city, home to some of the most important military headquarters, but also to tens of thousands of civilians going about ordinary lives. The city had experienced surprisingly few air raids compared to other Japanese cities. Tokyo had been devastated by firebombing. Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, all had suffered massive destruction. Hiroshima remained largely intact. Some residents wondered why they'd been spared. They didn't know they'd been left undamaged so America could measure the full effect of its new weapon. Above them that morning, an American bomber plane called the Enola Gay was flying toward the city. Inside that plane was a single bomb. The military had given it the nickname Little Boy. It weighed about 9,000 pounds and contained a special material called uranium-235. When it explodes, it would release the same amount of energy as 15,000 tons of dynamite, all going off at once. To picture that, imagine 15,000 tons. That's like 300 fully loaded semi-trucks worth of explosives packed into one bomb. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb detonated 600 meters above the city. The temperature at the hypocenter reached an estimated 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Celsius. The thermal radiation traveled at the speed of light. People within 1 kilometer of the hypocenter were exposed to lethal doses of radiation within seconds. The flash created what survivors called Pika, a brilliant light brighter than the sun. People who looked at the flash went blind. Some lost their sight forever. Others had their eyes badly burned. The heat did something strange and terrible. It left shadows on walls and sidewalks, but these weren't normal shadows that disappear when you move. These were permanent. They showed exactly where someone had been standing when the bomb went off. The person's body blocked the heat for just a split second. That split second was long enough to burn their shape into the stone. Then the person was gone, vaporized. Only their shadow stayed behind. Then the blast hit. It raced through the city at 680 miles per hour. Imagine the fastest car you've ever seen. Now make it 10 times faster. That's how fast this wall of force moved. It flattened every building for over a mile. Wooden houses didn't just fall down. They exploded into flames. Glass shattered into thousands of pieces that flew like tiny knives. Chunks of wood and metal turned into missiles that went straight through people. Sutsko Thurlow was 13, just a normal kid at school. When the bomb exploded, her school building fell on top of her. Everything went black. She was stuck under heavy beams and rubble. She couldn't move. All around her in the darkness, she heard her friends screaming, crying, calling for help. She thought she was going to die there. Somehow she found a small gap. She squeezed through it and pulled herself out. What she saw made her want to close her eyes forever. People were walking toward her through the smoke and flames, but they looked like monsters. Their skin hung off their arms and faces like melted wax. Some had their clothes burned right off their bodies. They stumbled forward with their arms stretched out in front of them because it hurt too much to let their burned skin touch anything. They moaned and cried. Some begged for water. Others called out names, searching for their mothers, their children, their husbands and wives. Sutsko watched her classmates die that day. Kids she'd laughed with that same morning. Now she's in her 90s and travels around the world telling their story over and over. She does it because she's desperate for us to understand the gravity of this issue. Dr. Sasaki found himself in a hospital missing its walls, filled with hundreds of injured patients. According to his later testimony, documented by journalist John Hersey, he became one of only 6 doctors in the city who could still function. He worked for days without rest, treating burns and radiation injuries with almost no supplies. The firestorm that followed burned for hours. A phenomenon called black rain fell, heavy droplets darkened by radioactive particles and debris. People who drank this water or were exposed to it suffered radiation poisoning even if they'd survived the initial blast. The radiation effects became apparent in the following days and weeks. People who seemed healthy began dying. Their hair fell out in clumps. They developed purple spots on their skin from internal bleeding. Their white blood cell counts plummeted. Many died from what doctors would later understand as acute radiation syndrome. By December 1945, about 140,000 people had died from the Hiroshima bombing. Out of those 140,000 dead, only about 20,000 were soldiers. The other 120,000 were regular people, just living their lives. Moms, dads, kids, babies, grandparents, teachers, store clerks, people who had absolutely nothing to do with the war. They didn't make any decisions about fighting. They just lived in the wrong city on the wrong day. The worst part? The dying didn't stop in 1945. The radiation from the bomb poisoned people's bodies. It stayed inside them. Years later, survivors started having cancer at much higher rates than other people. Leukemia became common about 7 years after the bomb. Then other cancers kept appearing. Some survivors got sick 10 years later, 20 years later, even 30 or 40 years later, all because of that one August morning. In Japan, the survivors are called hibakusha, which means people affected by the explosion. Today, fewer than 100,000 are still alive. Most are now in their 80s and 90s, but the memories of that terrible day still live with them. One of them, Sutsko Thurlow, received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 for her efforts to end the use of nuclear weapons. In her speech, she remembered what followed the bombing. In the weeks and months that followed, many thousands more would die from their injuries and the lingering effects of radiation. She spoke from experience. She was there and she saw it happen. Here's why this matters right now. 9 countries currently possess nuclear weapons: the United States, Russia, United Kingdom, France, China, India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. Together, they maintain approximately 12,500 nuclear warheads. Russia and the United States possess about 90% of them. Modern nuclear weapons are far more powerful than Little Boy. The largest nuclear bomb ever tested was built by Russia in 1961. It was called Tsar Bomba, a single bomb 3,000 times more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima. Think about that. The Hiroshima bomb killed 140,000 people. Now imagine that same destruction multiplied 3,000 times. That's the kind of power modern nuclear weapons hold. So when politicians talk about nuclear testing or threaten to use these weapons, this is what they're really talking about. Devices capable of killing millions of people in just minutes. In 1996, countries around the world signed an agreement called the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Its purpose:
the Kremlin, fortress of communist doctrine, is the setting of an historic event, the signing of an atom test ban. It's a jovial Khrushchev who is on hand, along with UN Secretary General U Thant, for the ceremony. The big three representatives, Dean Rusk, Andrei Gromyko, and Lord Hume, signed for the US, Russia, and Britain. Most other nations of the world, with the notable exception of France, Communist China, and Cuba, are to sign later.
Its purpose was simple: to stop nuclear testing altogether. Right now, 187 countries have signed it. The United States signed it too. But our government never made it official. We never ratified it, which means we never truly committed. So when anyone talks about starting nuclear tests again, they're moving us backward and throwing away decades of hard work that made the world safer.